liberator, but you can't murder liberation. You can murder revolutionary, but you can't murder revolution. And you can murder a freedom fighter, but you can't murder freedom.
You're tapped in, so let's get right to it. So the war has begun again between the United States, Israel, and Iran. Now, that's not something that was not expected. It wasn't like it was unexpected that it would resume. Just based on the way Donald Trump spoke while there was supposed to be ongoing negotiations towards a ceasefire and peace, he made it quite clear that that really wasn't something the United States and Israel actually wanted. And in spite of, him saying, oh, they're good negotiators, they're this, there's that, in spite of all that, he made it quite clear that he did not respect them. Just recently, a couple of days ago, he referred to them as scum, called them stupid people, things of that nature. So I don't see how anyone with any sense could think or would think that that type of language would not only prevent people from coming to a bargaining table, but would also prevent any negotiations in terms of getting what you want on the table, taken out of the equation of this whole Iran situation, doable. Trump has intentionally, this time, rather than Benjamin Netanyahu, Donald Trump has intentionally derailed any possible negotiations with Iran, and that was done, we think here at Tapped, purposely. Okay. Now, that being said, there are a couple of questions that are starting to come up in regards to this war between Iran, the United States, Israel versus Iran. One is the nuclear question. All right. That is a question I think is still at the forefront of this whole the conversation and debate and supposedly the reason for the war in Iran. The other, troops or boots on the ground. That's something that has been discussed, but for whatever reason, Trump has enough sense, or the right people are telling him, hey, man, that's going to be a bloodbath. So let's figure something else out rather than go that route, because we're going to get, we'll get mocked. Okay. And then there is the Strait of Hormuz. Now, and again, at every turn, Donald Trump has made it his business to just destroy any possibility at a real negotiation with Iran about the Strait of Hormuz and, let's say, nuclear weapons in Iran. All right. For his part, again, his actions do not speak to trying to eliminate these issues. No, it seems more and more each day that his attempts are to incite Iran into doing something that would have the United States and or Israel react in such a way to where it would be devastating to Iran. See, because their plan to unseat the authority there, the regime did not work. In spite of everything Benjamin Netanyahu told Donald Trump could be accomplished, has not been accomplished. You can even go as far as say, hey, the statements Donald Trump made, Marco Rubio made, Pete Hegseth made, and Benjamin Netanyahu made in terms of the obliteration of the Air Force, the Navy, and missile launching sites and things of that nature. All that seemed to have been not a miscalculation, but in terms of sharing that information with the people, a lie. Just recently, it's been discovered Iran has jets, fighter planes. It's been discovered that Iran has ships. And there's no doubt that Iran still has its missile capabilities. So even if they want to say, well, we've degraded those things. Even if they wanted to use that excuse, I think that that would be, for anyone to believe it, a mistake. A mistake. Everything that they're saying they've accomplished over there, there's always something that same day or the next day that would contradict everything that they're saying. You know, we control this or we can do that. It sounds good. It sounds good. But the truth of the matter is that's not the truth. That is not the truth. So the question again is nuclear armament, Iran acquiring nuclear weapons, not just one, but you have to think that if they're going to make one, they might as well make more than one. The Strait of Hormuz, and whether or not it's feasible or even, are they crazy enough to even put boots on the ground? That'd be Kurg Island or anywhere in the region or on Iran soil. That would be another, mistake on the Trump administration's behalf. But their greatest mistake was listening to Benjamin Netanyahu in terms of what could be accomplished fighting Iran. They were misinformed, and just, shamefully so. Shamefully so. So we want to talk about Iran and the nuclear question, and throughout this discussion, as well as the content I'm going to share with you guys, these clips, we also want to bring into account the Strait of Hormuz and the boots on the ground theory. Let's use that word. What can be accomplished if the United States and allies put boots on the ground? What would that look like? Okay, let's start with this. But first, as always, please like, share, follow, comment, and subscribe. You are tapped in. This is the Art of Political Discourse, and you're more than welcome to be here. We appreciate your presence. Now, let's get to this topic. All right, this content. Now, I have a clip, and in this clip, I have one Colonel Gregory, what's the guy's name? McGregor. That's his name, McGregor. All right. Colonel McGregor. All right. This guy seems to be very outspoken, very knowledgeable in terms of what's taking place, United States, Israel versus Iran. He has an opinion that I think a lot of people value. And because of his opinion and his ability to get it out there, I think a lot of people take pause and listen to what he's saying rather than believe what they're hearing in terms of the propaganda and the false narratives coming out of the Trump administration and from others. Now, this nuclear issue is one that is very, very serious. We think that, let's say, for instance, the strikes that we see taking place, the United States and Israel upon Iran, those strikes can degrade infrastructure. We know this, all right? We've seen the pictures, and Iran, in a lot of respects, have acknowledged, okay, yeah, some damage was done, but okay, so what? But those strikes can degrade the infrastructure, but it can't destroy the knowledge, the scientists, or the political will. If anything, being attacked makes the regime's internal case for a bomb stronger, not weaker. So bomb as you may, that does not stop that government or individuals within that country from, understanding that we have, one, the knowledge, scientific know-how to do this. And based upon what's happening to us, we're more than willing now, or, we'd be, compelled even more so to create not one bomb, like I said, but many, to defend or ward off any future attacks like what they've been going through since February. Now, that being said, I think the Trump administration knows this. The Bibi Netanyahu regime understands this fully, that Iran, it has, I think, 441 kilograms of at 60% enriched uranium. All right. Now that amount of uranium had initially had been reported and went unaccounted for after the strikes buried it supposedly under rubble at Fordon and Isfahan. No one has verified is destroyed rather than relocated. All right. So in other words, yeah, they say they buried it, they obliterated the facility, but no one can attest to whether or not it's buried under there underneath all that rubble. You know, they can't say, oh, well, they dug it out. They don't know, you know, and in fact, they don't know if it was actually in either one of those locations or facilities. So that's another thing that, you know, many people need to take into account when we're talking about the capability, know-how, and or the materials to build bombs, nuclear bombs, um, may still exist, you know? So now the IAEA inspectors have no real access, and they have not had any real access for over a year to those two facilities. So external verification of no weapons program is now largely guesswork. And that's what we're seeing coming out of the Trump administration, as well as the Netanyahu regime, all guesswork. Now, Colonel McGregor is, I think, the broader, his thesis is the broader aspect of what's really taking place or what's going on over there. In other words, the air, naval power alone can't compel a nation. So air and naval assets, U.S. assets, as well as Israel assets, cannot decide that war. You know, you can bomb the place. Yeah, you know, I mean, you use your ships and your planes to bomb it, but that will not require someone who is determined to fight back to surrender or give up, give in, bend the knee. That's just not how that works. You know, you can't compel a nation state's political surrender in that way. It's not going to happen like that. And Iran emerging intact after absorbing, imagine this, after everything they've been through since February, they've absorbed all this, and yet they continue to fight. They continue to rise, you know. So, you know, they have absorbed these campaigns from the United States and Israel. All right. And that in itself is evidence that coercion fails strategically, even if tactically successful strikes occurred. All right. Now, the counterpoint from the IAEA, U.S. officials, and other analysis, Grossi's own reporting says there's no evidence of an active weaponization program. The concern is an unverified stockpile, not proof of a bomb underway. And we're talking about that 441 kilograms of uranium that is believed, that enriched uranium that is believed to be in possession of Iran. Okay. Now, in any respect, again, the concern is an unverified stockpile. All right. There's no proof of a bomb being built or underway or in the process of being built. All right. So yeah, let's think about that. Why then are we hearing all this chatter, all this propaganda every time you hear Trump or Benjamin Netanyahu, Pete Hegseth, or any of the others saying Iran would not have a nuclear weapon, never? You know, what is that really about? You know, because there's no indication that Iran is actually building one. All right. But physical destruction of enrichment halls, centrifuge manufacturing, Karaj, TESA, and heavy water infrastructure at Kundab is real and significant, even if the exact status of buried material is unclear. But that is clear, you know. Some analysis of Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists argue that Iran has used the stockpile more as negotiating leverage than as a weapon dash. All right. Others say this is precisely how proliferation happens. Strikes that don't fully eliminate capability, but do eliminate any remaining incentive for restraint. This is close to McGregor's point, you know, that as an irony of coercion, you know, rather than coercion working. So, you know, the empirical facts here, what's left for the stockpile, whether Khamenei has actually authorized weaponization work, whether Iran will resume enrichment are genuinely unresolved, and it's not spin. All right, it's not spin. Uh, the let's say the phrase the Trump can't stop it phrase, right? Framing conflates two different claims that are worth separating. One, can strikes physically destroy the program, contested partial success at best. And two, can any external actor prevent Iran from deciding to build a weapon if it wants to? Much harder to control by force alone. Okay. And McGregor, I have him here. He's going to speak to that real point right there. And that point is also one shared by a lot of non-French, non-proliferation type analysts, okay, and not just war skeptics or warmongers, all right? So let's get into this clip. I want to share what he's saying, because what he's saying, again, is very significant. It's very significant. Also, the matter of the Strait of Hormuz and whether or not U.S. and or Israeli troops will put boots on the ground is also an issue that should be discussed. We don't hear enough of it, probably because the administration won't commit to such a thing, because to do so would actually put American lives, soldiers, servicemen and women's lives in danger. No doubt about that. No doubt about that. I want to address first, well, the boots on the ground. I think that's all hyperbole. That's not something, he had to be really, well, Benjamin Netanyahu would have to be really, really desperate to convince Donald Trump of going ahead with something as reckless as that. And Donald Trump himself would have to be really embarrassed, because he's not accomplishing anything he said he would, or he has, or confessed or professed to have done, not in the least. Now, again, that would be just suicide. So I think that's a question that needs not be addressed right now. Maybe in a couple of weeks, we'll see things change or escalate to the point where Donald Trump, at the behest of Benjamin Netanyahu, may think he has no other choice but to commit troops on the ground. All right. Now, the Strait of Hormuz, this thing about the guardian angel of the Strait of Hormuz, some phrase coined by Donald Trump just the other day, is just ridiculous. It's ridiculous. Coming to this situation initially saying, wait a minute, Iran can't charge, on internet fees for ships to pass through international waters. Marco Rubio said that himself. He said that that's illegal. No one can do that. That was maybe a couple of weeks ago or so, But Donald Trump turns around and said, yeah, we're going to charge a 20% fee. And we're going to manage and, maintain the Strait of Hormuz. Ships will go in and out. We'll just charge them 20% of what they're carrying through the strait. I'm like, guy, are you an idiot? That is such a contradiction, especially coming from your Secretary of State. He's quoting international law. Yeah, that's it. That's piracy, Trump. That is piracy. So the United States controlling the Strait of Hormuz, I think, is just a fantasy, a pipe dream, to say the least. Donald Trump has not the capability of controlling the Strait of Hormuz. He cannot protect ships coming or going from that strait or into it. It's just there's not anything he can control, or even actually pass along to others, give others confidence to want to pass through the strait, thinking that he'll take care of them. They won't be molested, so to speak, or fired upon by Iranian missiles and drones. It makes no sense for Trump to say this. But again, a lot of what Donald Trump says doesn't make sense. The only thing that's making sense is the corruption that he's lining his pockets and his allies and children's pockets with. That's the only thing that's making sense. The corruption in the administration. Now, as to the nuclear weapons, we think here at TAP that it would be okay for Iran to have nuclear weapons. In fact, we think that's necessary. They should very well acquire nuclear weapons. Why? Because it would represent an equalizer. You know, a lot of people, well, especially the United States and Israel and other Western countries, as well as some in the Middle East, say, well, if you allow Iran to have nuclear weapons, they'll fire them. They'll fire them and they'll target people and strike, countries with nuclear weapons. That's propaganda. That's fear mongering, actually. That's the United States and Israel. And it's always been Israel's game plan to say this. And they've said it so much for so long that now you hear United States politicians and other Western leaders and politicians regurgitating the same BS. The fact of the matter is, if you give Iran, or if Iran builds successfully nuclear weapons, all that represents is equilibrium. It represents an equalizer, balance. What that would do, what it would precipitate is Israel, the occupiers in Palestine, would cease their attacks under threat, of course, that they will be fired upon, that this thing will go, it will go to that extreme. That would give them pause. More than likely, they'll pull out of Lebanon. They will also pull out of Gaza, Palestine, and they would respect the borders that the international community had set, some time ago. You go back to the original arrangement. So if Israel is really concerned with having the right to exist, then that would be the way to do that or exercise that. All right. But giving Iran acquiring a nuclear weapon would also, again, it would make the Zionist regime of Israel pause and think out everything they do. You will not see what we're seeing or what we've been seeing in history take place in Palestine or in that region, because this is what Israel wants to happen. Not only that, but you will see United States back up like, dang, they got a weapon. There's nothing we could do now. All it does is level the playing field. So to hear politicians and actually, politicians from all over the world, Westerners mostly, and corporate heads, corporate giants say, oh, you can't let them get a nuclear weapon. It's only being said, again, to frighten not just American people, but people of the world, in respect that they think that they've heard it so much that the terrorist regime of Iran will shoot these missiles, just because. And we don't think that's the case. We don't think that's the case, no more than we think that Iran is the greatest terrorist on the face of the earth. We think the United States, other Western countries, and Israel are the greatest terrorists the earth has seen, the world has seen, especially to date. All right. But giving them a nuclear weapon would not precipitate them firing those weapons just because. We don't think that at all. Not only that, but you hear this phrase always spoken and repeated by politicians, the Trump administration especially, and others in the United States, as well as those in Europe and Israel, saying they're always talking about death to America. They've killed thousands of American citizens. They always give you that point of argument without giving you the facts as to why any of this has occurred. When they say death to America, they're not speaking directly to the American people. They're not saying, hey, we're going to kill all of you. We're going to drop a nuke on you guys. That's not what they're saying. They're saying death to American politicians, to the American policy, to the American government that has run roughshod over the world, that has committed genocide, enslaved people, that have done and committed atrocities in the Middle East, Africa, all over the world. They're saying death to that system of hegemony. That's what they're speaking about, But Israel is very clever in how they put forth propaganda, how they paint narratives, and if you have a receptive audience like the United States, or politicians in the United States government, some of which are aligned with their Ashkenazi European contacts, they tend to believe it. They all are on the same team. They're getting paid. But we think that, again, Iran having a nuclear weapon is not the threat that the United States, Israel, and the Western world paints it to be. It's about fear mongering. Just as the United States, Israel, and Western countries are about warmongering, they're also about fear mongering. So we think that Iran would use those nuclear weapons as deterrents. That's what we think. We think that they will not shoot or fire missiles at anyone. But they're coming to the realization that just to have them is that security they absolutely need against certain players like the United States and Israel. All right, I got this clip. Let's drop this clip, give us more context. And again, this clip is courtesy of, let me see, Analysis 24H. And this is Colonel Douglas McGregor, all right? And he's speaking to, will Iran acquire nuclear weapons, and the fact that Trump can't stop it if they wanted to have nuclear weapons. Trump can't stop that process. Let's hear what he has to say.
Can they hang on to the strait like they say?
Yes, there's nothing to keep them from doing so. They're in a very wonderful position. The strait, for reasons of geology and topography, is very difficult to control, but they have the means. We do not. This is not a place that you can easily assault on the ground or from the air and exert.
And he's speaking to Iran's ability to contain, maintain, and keep the Strait of Hormuz, as well as keep America from claiming that they run it, own it, or control it. This is what he's speaking to.
Any real control or influence. They can, as you point out, effectively destroy everything on the western side of the Gulf. They can do that. I would argue the Iranians can destroy Israel as well, completely. And increasingly, there doesn't seem to be much incentive for the Iranians to do much else. I mean, if you're sitting in their position right now and you know that we're trying to build replacements, why wait around? What's the incentive to wait? It's the Russian position in 2022 was, well, we have an inkling of what's going on over in eastern Ukraine. They captured plans that they had found in eastern Ukraine that talked about the reconquest of Crimea and striking deep into Russia. They knew what was being built up. They didn't appreciate how bad it was. They underestimated the enormous investment of time, money, and resources that we had made in the Ukrainians. But it became clear that there's no incentive to wait around to be destroyed. It's better to take it on, fight it, and win it, regardless of how long it takes. I think that's the Iranian position too, and I think it's the winning card, so to say. They can outlast everybody else. That's why I say it's war to the last missile. Who runs out first?
And it's ironic and distressing. If that was the only issue we had with the Strait of Hormuz, it's a pretty bleak picture for us. But there's one other issue that makes it even more amazingly bad for our side, is point number one in this whole memorandum is that the war has to end in Lebanon between Israel and Hamas, neither one of them were even party to the MOU. Professor Morandi also spoke on that and laid out an even more clear Iranian position than they have to date on that topic.
The Iranians have been very clear to the Americans. There will be no nuclear deal if Lebanon is evacuated, if it is not evacuated, if the war does not end. There will be no nuclear negotiations if this does not take place. So that's really up to the Americans. And in addition to that, the Iranians can make life for the Americans much more difficult in the Strait of Hormuz. If the Americans refrain from carrying out their obligations elsewhere, then the Iranians will feel that they are not obliged to allow all that many ships to pass through.
And that's actually what they're doing right now. But that's President Trump's primary political requirement: no nuclear weapons, etc. But he's saying it, and it's so weird because the Iranian side has always said we aren't going after nuclear weapons. So that's easy. We'll declare that and whatever. We'll negotiate that after these other things are done. But now they're saying we won't even start that process unless this happens. And so, Doug, I mean, tell me if you'd see it differently. But if that is truly the position of the Iranian government, there won't be any negotiations at all because Israel will never do what was required.
Well, from the standpoint privately of people in Washington and Israel, is very much the same. This nuclear business is almost a distraction. In fact, I would say it's a major strategic distraction. If you go back and look at the comments that were made before and immediately after the first major round of war that began in February and then concluded, I would argue, I guess at least temporarily before July. What was the focus? What did people talk about? They say, well, nuclear weapons, yeah, that's important, but it's really the ballistic missile arsenal. Mm-hmm. It's Iran's ability to threaten Israel. And that's the problem. What Morandi says is not wrong, but he needs to understand something. There is only one acceptable outcome for Israel in this war, and that is the complete destruction of Iran. Mm-hmm. Just as the only outcome right now that satisfies people in Kiev, and for that matter, in the globalist elites, not the populations of Europe, but the globalist elites, is the destruction of Russia. Just as they wanted to carve up Russia into smaller pieces, rape it and exploit it for its resources, that's exactly what the people in Washington and in Israel want to do to Iran. Mm-hmm. That has not changed. Now, the other issue on nuclear weaponry is as follows. If you were really all that concerned about preventing people from developing and fielding nuclear weapons, don't attack them.
Right.
But that never really occurred to anybody because it really wasn't at the top of the agenda. Remember, the Israelis would probably welcome any excuse they could find to launch a nuclear weapon at Iran. Mm-hmm. And we would probably sit there and applaud. Fine, great, go ahead and do it. Don't wait for anybody in the United States to wake up, smell the coffee, and understand the utter insanity and folly of all of this. Don't expect anybody to take note of the views of the rest of the world, let alone the Chinese and the Russians. It's not going to happen. Nobody cares. Nobody gives a damn. So what are we dealing with? We're dealing with the Keens of the world, obedient servants of the Jewish lobby in the United States, well paid for their trouble, well paid for their efforts, richly rewarded for everything they say and do. And they are going to flog this horse until it's dead.
Did you guys hear that? That is the process. This is what's actually taking places in our halls of power. You have people in place. They're placed there to convince those who are in seats of power to do what they are being bidded to do. And everybody's been handsomely rewarded for this. Again, Israel's issue isn't about Iran having a nuclear weapon. Again, this is just propaganda that they've told people time and time again over the years, over the decades. It's about getting rid of the government there so that they can expand this idea or this greater Israel plan. There are resources there, and the United States is in cahoots with it. Iran initially had no plans to build a nuclear weapon. It's against their tenets. It's against their faith to have weapons of mass destruction like that. Is written in their tenets. It can be changed, if, at such a time they feel like, hey, we may need to do this just to deter, to have these people back up, fall back, so that would be the reason for doing that. And I say if they were to do that, it would create a great balance, but the issue has never really been about nuclear weapons. The issue has always been about Israel being able to go not only into Iran, but the majority of the Middle East, and represent itself as the hegemony or the force, the power in the region. It's about hegemony. It's about control. It's about also the resources. They feel they're being stifled by Iran. Iran is the big brother in the community, and that community is the region. You know, Israel has been able to go into Syria and devastate it. They brought war to Iraq a few times, you know. It's about not nuclear weapons, but more about, you know, a land grab thing, more occupation, more land, as well as it is about the resources. That's what's important. That's what the real play is about. To hear, oh, death to America, they want to hit us with a nuclear bomb, that's all propaganda. I've said this a few minutes ago, and, you know, thankfully, Colonel Douglas McGregor is saying the same thing.
That's Iran. So, having said that, what is Professor Morandi's answer? Build more missiles, strengthen your defenses,
Right.
get ready for the worst,
Right.
because it's coming. I don't think Iran has much choice in that matter.
And then you take into consideration also, Iran was more prepared, well stocked when it came to missiles, well stocked when it came to drones, so much more than the United States and Israel, we think, here TAP combined. This is how much, that was how big that stockpile was. They have an arsenal even still to this day. So when Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu, Pete Hegseth, and Marco Rubio say, hey, we've decimated their stockpile, they've used 80%, 90% of their weapons, you know, they're running out. We tend to not trust that or believe that that's the truth. We don't. We think that Iran has been preparing for this for decades. They saw the writing on the wall, and they've been preparing for decades. We also think that they haven't even begun to shoot some of their good stuff. They're holding on to that good stuff, those real devastating missiles that they have and everybody knows about. They hold on to them while they build or replenish their stockpile of one of the missiles and drones they've already used. We think that they are well stocked and prepared, and it's been said by Colonel McGregor as well as others, they're ready and prepared to wait this thing out. It does more harm to the United States and Israel than it does to Iran. And this is what we think that the United States and Israel do not understand.
And you know, I'm listening to you talk here, Doug, and I'm remembering things that we've said over the months, things that we said prior to the war started. And it seems to me we have now, and tell me if you agree or disagree with this, we have walked ourselves into the worst imaginable outcome. You are lobbied so many times. All you got to do is the walk away theory. Just walk away, declare victory, say whatever you want, and then just leave. And then don't even worry about MOUs or negotiations, anything else. You can just declare your victory and leave.
We thought that's what Trump was going to do a couple of weeks back. They put that MOU out, the memorandum of understanding out, and we thought that, okay, this is his off ramp. He's going to he found an off ramp to extract himself, more really than anybody else, including the U.S. military, from this quagmire. We thought that that would be, you know, his cue or his understanding. Okay, here's my out. Let me take it. But for whatever reason, that changed. You know, from this war will last a couple of weeks to, 4 weeks to a couple of months, has already gone into almost 6 months now.
That would have been the least bad option we had. But I think that now that we have, with this MOU, Trump has trapped himself into not even a no-win. That would have been a no-win situation. This is what I think from listening to you.
And again, Trump says anything all the time anyway. we have victory. We won the war. He could have said that and walked away, left it alone, say, hey, man, like he initially said, we have no use of the Strait of Hormuz. We don't care about that. We don't use it. We have our own oil. We took Venezuela's oil. You know, that was his cue. And most people thought that. Again, we here at TAP, we thought that. Like, oh, he got his out. He has his off ramp. Take it. The more he said, oh, yeah, we won. We were victorious. You know, we decimated their obliterated. They have nothing. So we done our job. Just, hey, man, no, we got to understand they're open the strait, leave the strait alone, and exit. That was the impression a lot of us had. And for whatever reason, that changed. And it did overnight.
We're in a must-lose situation now, because with the Strait of Hormuz, we can't get it fully open and we can't get the terms that we want, and Lebanon's not going to go anywhere, or Hezbollah's not going to go anywhere. Now then, the only thing Trump can do is to go back to war, because if he just walks away now without the Strait of Hormuz or without Lebanon, then he is seen as a loser. So it seems to me like almost all the pressure is that he must go and do this, which will guarantee a physical defeat.
Then this is what it points to in terms of what this guy is saying. Then we're dealing with Trump's ego. And I tell you what, for the president of the United States, who has an ego as massive as Donald Trump's is, that doesn't bode well for the United States of America. If we're talking about his ego being bruised, being hurt, him not being able to accept defeat, and you don't have to call it defeat. He can say, hey, we won, and leave. But his ego won't allow him to leave, has him remaining in a situation that is not tenable, a situation that he cannot succeed in. It's his ego. And it might be that it's being fed by Benjamin Netanyahu is the reason why Donald Trump can't extract himself from, again, this quagmire that he allowed himself to be drug into.
Yes, I think that's true. And I think, again, I don't want to keep repeating it, but I think it's true. It's war to the last missile. And we're not leaving until we think we have expended all of our munitions and capabilities. We're not going anywhere.
Which is also dangerous. You know, because the world is watching, Russia's watching, China's watching, South Korea, North Korea is watching. All those nations that have a bone to pick with the United States is watching. You know, so, you know, after this, United States say, okay, if they should decide to extract themselves from this situation, okay, let's go over and let's mess with Cuba now. And they experience, you know, resistance, fight back. They're in an even worse position dealing with a small country like that. You know, they may be more inclined to put boots on the ground there, but, you know, I see that as a Bay of Pigs 2.0, you know. Oh, wow.
And Donald Trump, the big disappointment with Donald Trump is as follows. If you go back, and it's not just a question of looking at what he was saying before he was elected, but let's look at what he's done since he arrived. What has he really succeeded in fundamentally changing?
Nothing.
And I think the answer is nothing. Arguably, one of the keystones in the edifice of success that he was trying to build was the simple passage of legislation on voter integrity. I mean, it's hard to imagine any country in the world that would say, we don't want every citizen that comes to vote on election day to show their identity, lest we should discover they are American citizens. Instead, we don't want to demand anything of anybody. And effectively, we're leaving that into the laps of the states. So there's no voter integrity. If there's no voter integrity, how meaningful are elections? If elections aren't meaningful, what does that say about the republic? Now, you would think that what I just described would be at the top of Donald Trump's list of critical tasks to be performed. Have you heard him say a lot about that lately? Not really. I think he's walked away from these things that were vitally important to the survival of our republic, and instead is focused on all the things that are important to his donors, to the donor class, the globalists that currently govern the West.
Oligarchs.
What else do you want to call them besides donors and globalists? Zionists, neocons, the Epstein class. I mean, use whatever you want, all lump them together. They're the people that are driving this train. They could care less about elections. They could care less about the electorate. They don't care who shows up or doesn't show up. They're in control. That's the problem. And President Trump has done nothing to change that, nor do I expect that he will in the near future.
Okay. And that was Colonel McGregor, Douglas McGregor. And very insightful, his take on things I respect to a degree. What's a fact is that Donald Trump is in a situation that he's allowed himself to be in at this point, at this junction of where they are, because of his ego. Because of his ego. His ego was bruised a couple of weeks ago when the world was saying, oh, you're BB's boy. BB run you, BB runs the American government. He got mad, his ego, it came up, that super ego came out, that id came out. He don't run nothing, do what I tell him to do, you know what I mean? And to prove that point, he summoned him or, made some, bunk phone calls or whatnot, and then turned around and said, I'm going to show you guys I run this. I'm going to destroy Iran, and that's what he's been on ever since. We're dealing with an individual whose ego has been bruised because coming into this situation, his ego was so inflated that he was convinced there was nothing he could not accomplish. By failing to do all the things that he said he would do during the campaign and up into the point where we are now, he has failed at. He hasn't accomplished anything. His ego is bruised in the hugest way, and he does not know how to deal with that. And that's going to be a problem for the United States, the people, not the government, the people. So, those are my thoughts on this situation. Let us know what you think about this. Put it in the comments. Let us know. Is it really an issue, nuclear armament with Iran, them having nukes? Is that really an issue? Or is the issue about getting rid of the regime so that Israel can have hegemony over the area? Is that the issue? Is the Strait of Hormuz really an issue? It wasn't an issue before February 28th. It was not an issue. And there had been conflict before, in that region, So let us know what you think the issue really is. If you don't agree with me, please let me know what it is that you think the issue is. All right. So until next time, take care of yourselves and each other.
You can murder a liberator, but you can't murder liberation. You can murder a revolutionary, but you can't murder revolution. And you can murder a freedom fighter, but you can't murder freedom.